Hey friends, it's Simon Hurley and welcome to a brand new video. Today's release day and I'm so excited. Usually I would come to you guys live, but I wanted to share a pre-filmed video instead because today is all about lunar pastes and there's lots of dry time that goes into them, so I wanted to pack tons of techniques into today's video. I'm so excited to not only share a new paste tool set, which is going to be so useful when you're using your pastes in all of your card making techniques, but also 3 new beautiful colors of pastes that I cannot wait to share in today's video. Everything that I'm sharing today is available now, and I'll have links down below that help support me to check it all out. So without further ado, let's turn on my work surface and check it all out. Alright, so first let's take a look at the new paste tool set. I really love this tool set because it has everything included in it that I love to use with these pastes. So first off is a palette knife. This is kind of a triangular, smaller palette knife that's great to get the paste out and use it on the bigger tool, but also to get into smaller, detailed areas. I love to use this palette knife for pretty much everything like that. Then there are 2 larger scraper tools in the set. I love to use these to kind of scrape across the surface. You'll see me today use it in several different techniques, and it's also great to kind of smooth the paste all throughout the stencil and get a really even coverage. So it comes with 2 inside each set of those. Then there are 3 new lunar pastes. There is Shooting Star, Roar, and Tropical Tango. I love these 3 bright and bold new colors. So you'll see me, I'm going to take these colors and just swatch them out here using the new palette knife. I love how super bright and vibrant these colors are, and they also have that added metallic shine. Now you'll see there that I kind of used the palette knife to add a bunch of texture to it as well. I wanted to share that because you can really smooth these out like I'm doing here, or you could add tons of texture and dimension to them, and they really retain all of that dimension as they dry, which is amazing. That's why it's so cool that they're texture paste. They're a little bit thicker than a paint, but they're super smooth to be able to spread out. So once I let these 3 dry, you can see the finished colors there. They kind of dry and become even more metallic. So here is that super bright and shiny yellow. And when we compare it to Slippery When Wet, which is the past yellow, you can see this one is a lot more actual yellow rather than kind of being a dirtier gold color. So I really love it. Then we move into Roar, which is this bold orange and super vibrant. And compared to Traffic Cone, this one's a lot darker and more orange. The other one was a little bit more salmon colored. Lastly, we have Tropical Tango, and there was nothing like it. It's this beautiful, rich teal color. And then I compared it to Minty Fresh here because this is the closest kind of mint color that we have. But you can see they're totally both different and gorgeous. So I'm going to first start off here by showing how to use this scraper tool. So I liked to include this palette knife in the set so that you had both of the tools that you needed to use it. And then I'm going to scoop the paste out with the palette knife and lay it onto the edge of the scraper tool. And you can kind of take several different colors and blend them together on the tool. And it's going to create a beautiful blend when we swipe it across the surface. So then all that's left to do is swipe this across a piece of my Struck White cardstock. And you guys can see it takes a couple different times. There's still lots of paste on here. You just kind of have to keep tilting your tool down to get more and more of the paste out. And there is that finished result once it's dry. I love all of the gorgeous shine and the blend in between the color and just how smooth it can get with that scraper tool. Now next I'm going to bring out the tiny circle stencil because there was still lots of leftover paste on this scraper tool. And I can use any of the excess kind of through the stencil and spread it right through. I needed to add more paste, so you can either add it straight to the scraper tool like I shared, or you can then take it and add paste directly onto your surface here. This is another really easy way to do it, and a great way to use the scraper tool. I just apply color kind of messily on either side where I want the color to be, and then I can take my scraper tool and scrape any excess off the surface to kind of smooth it out and blend it all together. So that's another way to use it by not applying it directly to the scraper, but just smoothing out any of the surface of any paste you've applied down. And then again, once this dries, you see here, it becomes even more shiny and just has a beautiful look to the blend. And I love how it looks through that tiny circle stencil with that super smooth paste. Now I also wanted to share that you can ink blend over lunar paste and it won't affect it whatsoever. I love to do this because we have the coordinating colors of lunar pastes. So here I'm using the coordinating color Roar and a little bit of Shooting Star as well to blend over top of the background on either side with the coordinating colors. This makes for a gorgeous tone-on-tone background. I love how it looks because when you tilt it, then you're able to see that circle design. And the way that it resists ink makes it really great for a lot of different background techniques like this. So there is the finished background once I ink blended it all together. Like I said, it just is great for a nice tone-on-tone effect with the matching coordinating colors. So once I'm done with that, I cut down that background, and then I'm going to finish off the card with a focal point. Here I'm using the pretty Peony Stamp set from Hurley Create. I love all the different lined images in this, and the florals are beautiful. Here I'm stamping down the lined image using a little bit of VersaFine Clair Nocturne ink. This is a great pigment ink, and it's going to give a really beautiful lined image that has lots of detail. Now, because pigment ink takes a little bit longer to dry, I love to take a little bit of clear embossing powder and throw it right over top. Then I'll heat set that, and it gives it a nice shiny and finished looking effect. And it also makes it smudge proof, so I can go in with any inks or paints right away and start working using the image I stamped. I wanted to go super simple with the coloring since I already added tons of color into the background. So here I used just mini ink blending tool, and I used one of the lighter colors Piggyback and blended up a little bit of pink ink from the bottom. Then I went in with a little bit of rosy cheeks to add some shading, and I added some yellow to the edges of the flowers as well to kind of keep it along a similar color scheme as the background. Then I went into the stem to just get that really super fine line and color in that with a little bit of green later gator. I love how easy it was to use my blending tools on this and then a little bit of paintbrush to finish it off. To add even more interest to it, I used the tiny circle stencil again and a little bit of more ink. Here I used some shooting star and a little bit of that pink ink again to build up a second layer. This is going to add just a really subtle layer of dots on top of the flower and give it a little bit of texture and depth and dimension to the image. I really like how it looked in the end, and I've been doing that a lot lately. Before I add it down to the card, I ended up doing a little bit of fussy cutting using my Fiskars Spring Assist scissors. These are my favorite scissors for this because they spring back out at you so your hands don't get tired, and they're also great at getting into lots of the little details too. I ended up leaving a little bit of a border around it too, so it's not super difficult to cut out at all. Then I added that right down onto the center of my card, and I'm going to go in using a sentiment from the same set. I like to kind of take the plastic acetate sheet and test out a couple different sentiments before I commit to one to see what's going to fit best. I ended up going with the sentiment that said, "You bring me so much joy," stamped it down using that same Versamark ink, and then throw over a layer of clear heat embossing powder. Then I'll heat set that until it turns clear and shiny, and for this sentiment, I wanted to go in and fussy cut it out. I like to fussy cut around sentiments, especially like this. Instead of leaving them on just a regular rectangle, fussy cutting them out makes them feel a little bit more organic and finished off, and it also kind of fits in with the card a little bit more so you can show more of the background rather than having it on a large sentiment strip. I really like doing this, and I think if you guys try it out, you'll be surprised how it makes your card look really nice and finished. So once I'm all done with that, I added it all together, and there we have our finished card. I love that beautiful, bold background using that tone-on-tone look with the Lunar Paste and ink, and then finishing off with this gorgeous floral on top. For the next two cards, I'm going to use this Floral Mosaic layering stencil. I love this one because it's got those two layers, which makes it really fun to use with Lunar Paste and inks. For this first layer, I'm going to lay down the large floral image, and then I'm going to kind of tape it down to my slimline background. I wanted to show another way to use that scraper tool to get kind of a marbled effect and a really easy way to spread your color across the background. So here I went in with several different shades of the Lunar Paste. I'm mixing in old and new colors together to get a really beautiful blend and marbling effect. Here I went in with a little bit of Shooting Star, now I'm using some Roar. We're going to end up going in with Prom Queen and Bee Sting too to really mix and blend some of the warm tone colors together. So here to do this, all I did was go in with a little bit of each color and I kind of spotted it on in different areas. Again, I'm messily applying this color down because we're going to really easily smooth it out when we come in with our scraper tool from the tool set. So I'm going to just throw down a little bit of this Prom Queen and then finish it off with some Bee Sting paste here and there. Again, this doesn't need to be super clean and there can be excess paste on the surface too. So once I'm done laying it all down, then I'll go in with the scraper tool and scrape back and forth to get a nice smooth and even effect on here. I like to do it several times too because it kind of gives a little bit more of a blended effect, but if you want to just swipe once and get more of a marbled, mottled effect where the colors aren't as mixed, that's beautiful as well and gives a unique result. I just love how smoothly this scraper tool kind of smooths out any of the colors. It usually takes a lot of work if you're just using a palette knife, but with the scraper it is so easy. Now to use any excess color that's still on the stencil, I decided to just spray the stencil down and see what I would get. So then I flipped it over onto another slimline background and pressed it down onto the surface there. To press it down, I used a little bit of paper towel to make sure that no kind of extra color or anything would seep in between the gaps of the stencil. Then when I lifted it off, you'll see that we got kind of a spotty result because some of the lunar paste was drying already, but I'm still going to use this as kind of a mixed media background. Since I used the stencil to get the reverse image, I can then use that same exact stencil to go back in and stencil the florals right over top of it. I love mixing the inks together with the lunar paste like this to create really beautiful backgrounds, and they pair seamlessly together to create these great effects. For this first color, I'm using some Shooting Star to add the lightest color down, and then I'll go in with a little bit of Guppy and finish it off with some Bee Sting to add a little bit of shading and really bring these florals to life. I'm using the little mini domed blending tools. I find these are great for not getting any harsh marks and kind of adding a little bit of color here and there to the blending and getting such smooth effects in the end. Now we've already got some color going in the background there with that kind of mixed media technique that we did, but I'm also going to add some texture using the second layer of the stencil. The second layer kind of adds these mosaics in the background and gives tons of great texture and depth and dimension that we have going on. So for this one, I'm going to use some more warm colors, but a little bit darker. I'm going in with some oranges and pink colors to really finish it off and bring this whole background together. Like I said, we already had some of that started, and it's going to give kind of a mixed media look to layer these different pieces together and finish this off. It's not going to be as clean and simple, but I think it'll turn out beautiful. When I lift that off, here we have that background all nice and finished. I love how it looks, and like I said, it's a little bit different than what I usually go for, but that mixed media effect is beautiful, and I love that we used the excess paste to start off this background. Now to finish off the first background that we started, I'm going to tape down this mosaic stencil again, but this time we're going for a more clean and simple look how it was intended. For this one, I'm going in with a little bit of clear skies on a blending brush and blend through that background with some of my color. Now for this, I ended up using a blending brush. It kind of helps with some of these smaller stencils when you want to get into all of the different detail. Sometimes I find the bristles of a brush can really get down into those details and give you a little bit crisper and clean of an image. So if you're struggling with that, definitely give blending brushes a try. Here I'm using Gina K's blending brushes, but anything will work. Then I also ended up using a little bit of Midnight Snack and shading the edge a little bit to give it some more depth and dimension. When you lift that off, I love how this background looks. Those florals are so beautiful and shiny with all those different pastes, and the background looks beautiful with the mosaics too. So I added this down onto a slimline card base, and then I'm going to finish it off with a sentiment. For the sentiment stamp set, I used the lovely Lantanas stamp set, and this has some really great encouraging sentiments. Today I just ended up using the sentiment that said "with deepest sympathy." I stamped it down using some clear sticky Versamark ink on black cardstock and then threw over a layer of white heat embossing powder. Then once I heat set that, it gives a really great white contrast, and I love the bold look of that sentiment. This card stands out so much by itself. I didn't feel the need to add any embellishments, but that lunar paste just shines so bright and is gorgeous. For the next background, I ended up using the Sweater Weather stencil. I love this stencil. I originally designed it for Christmas, but I think it's a great geometric pattern that shifts really well too. So I added this down onto my stark white card base and taped it down in place while we're working. Then I'm going to bring in my Tropical Tango Lunar Paste, and I'm working on a glass mat now because I'm going to kind of create a palette using the Lunar Paste. So I'm using that palette knife and spreading it out over top. I like to spread kind of a thin layer to make sure I can control how much paste I'm grabbing. This way, when I dip my blending sponge into the Lunar Paste, I'm not getting too much paste and it's not going to seep underneath the stencil because there's too much. So once I get that nice even amount, I can then bring it over top of my stencil and use a kind of blending motion to blend it all over the background. I love the way that this looks, and because we're applying it super thin like this, it also allows for an even quicker dry time than Lunar Paste already has. This takes maybe a minute or two to dry, and you have a beautiful and shiny background still, which I love. So then once I lift this off the surface, you can see all that shine already, and once it dries, it becomes even shinier. Then I'm going to use any of the excess paste and kind of create a focal point. I didn't end up using this today, but you can either use this to kind of die cut a piece that's nice and shiny, or you can use this as a background that you can add a floral or an image on top of and really make it stand out on your card. I love the bold color and shine that it has, and I think it'll stand out great as a background. Now I'm going to spray down the blending tool because you want to make sure to clean all of your tools and stencils right away before the lunar paste dries. So with the blending tools, you can spray down the tool or bring it to a sink to make sure that you get all of the color out of it. You kind of want the sponge to go almost back to white, and then it'll be usable again, but if you let the paste dry in there, it becomes crusty and kind of unusable. Now I'm using any of the excess paste that's on this stencil. You can see since I moved it a little bit faster, it worked even better than it did last time. I'm going to spray it down, lay it down, and it transfers down my color really beautifully all over my background to get this kind of watercolored effect. It's just gorgeous, and I love how it looks in the end. I like that that just came out using any of the waste lunar paste, and we didn't have to bring any new mediums into it. Then I'm laying down that same stencil over top of the background, but this time I'm going to shift the design a little bit. So when I shift it, it's going to kind of create a double pattern and create a really cool effect. So this time I'm going to go in and lay down my lunar paste again on the palette here and use it the same way that I did earlier, taking that sponge method and going in and doing the blending. Now when you shift the stencil like this and you apply the lunar paste over top, it's going to give this beautiful result because the background is kind of a watercolor effect, and the front foreground that we're doing this blending with is going to have tons of shine and color to it. I love how it's going to look. It almost gives a tone-on-tone effect though, because it's that same color just watered down a little bit. Then I'm going to bring in my heat tool, heat set it just a little bit before I go in, and then shift my stencil one more time to then finish off the design of the background. It's really easy to just move your stencil and get this beautiful effect. It almost looks a little bit like a kaleidoscope, which I think is awesome. So once we've added that color down, you guys can see the end result of this is just gorgeous. Now I ended up doing the same thing with the other background. This one I did that blending with, and I ended up going in then with just ink. And like I said, ink pairs beautifully with the lunar paste. I think they work great together because the color coordinates, but also because one is shiny and one is a little bit more dull. So it kind of almost acts as an embellishment to the card when you add on that lunar paste to give it that beautiful and bright, bold shine that it has. Here is a closer look at both of those backgrounds. I love that this came out of using some of the waste lunar paste and then adding onto the background by doing that shifting technique. To finish off one of the cards here, I'm going to use this background and go in using some Tropical Tango ink, and I'm going to go right around the edges to kind of darken it up. I love to do this to add a vignette, and leaving the center a little bit lighter will draw your eye to it. So then I'm going to go in using the Zesty Stamp set. I love the large lemon branch image in this set, and I think it acts as such a beautiful focal point image. So I'm going to take that stamp out of the packaging and stamp it down using a little bit of the VersaFine black ink again. I'm going to stamp that down for a nice crisp image, and then once again I'll throw over a layer of clear heat embossing powder to kind of heat set that in place and make sure that I can throw ink down on top of it without it moving when I'm trying to do my blending. I also really do love the finished look of that little bit of gloss that it adds to the image as well. So that is kind of why I throw over a layer of clear embossing powder on every image I stamp. Now to color this in, I'm going to use the Lemon Branch Layering Stencil. This has two different stencils in the set, and it's really great because it matches up with this image. All you have to do is line up each different layer and then use inks to color it in. Here I'm using a little bit of Shooting Star and my mini ink blending tools, and I'm just going to blend these lemons in. Now the lemons are only one layer, so I like to give it some kind of natural shading by shading from one edge and applying a little bit more ink to one side and then leaving one side a little bit lighter. This is going to kind of bring the lemons to life and make them look a little bit more 3D when you do kind of a variation of inking like that. Now I've moved the stencil up and I've lined up the branch, and then I can go in with a little bit of Gur ink and blend the branch right in. Now I've taped off a little bit of the excess as well to make sure I don't go off the edge of the surface. And I also wanted to mention that I'm using the Make Art Station, and I love this for layering stencils like this when I have to add a couple different layers down and shift the stencil. This is because I can use those magnets to place it down, and I'm not super worried about having to add a bunch of tape to the surface as well. It makes it super easy to blend down the stencils. So then I'm going to go in using a little bit of Tropical Tango for the leaves. This is because I used Tropical Tango at the background, and I wanted to kind of further incorporate it into the lemon branch. And so by adding it down onto the leaves, it's going to tie the whole card together. Then I moved it to the second layer of the leaves, and I'm going to just use the same Tropical Tango color, but blend it a little bit darker to get a heavier inking and kind of a shadowed layer to it. I love how this looks. Like I said, that layering stencil along with it really helps to color that in and give it a great, beautiful effect. Now I'm going to add that down onto my card using a little bit of foam tape for some dimension, press that down, and then I'm going to stamp down the sentiment that says, "You're my main squeeze." I think this one is such a fun friendship sentiment for this lemon card and really ties it all together. And again, you guys guessed it, I'll go over it with a layer of clear heat embossing powder and heat set it until it's clear and shiny to finish it off. And I love how this card turned out, that background with a little bit of tropical tango and the 2 layers, and then finishing off with this beautiful lemon branch on the front and center. Alright guys, I hope you really enjoyed today's video. If you did, please give it a big thumbs up and leave me a comment down below letting me know which card was your favorite. I always love chatting with you guys down there. Alright, I hope you have a wonderful day and thank you so much for hanging out with me. Bye guys!